UFC heavyweight contender Jailton Almeida has offered an intriguing perspective on the public backlash he received following his loss to Alexander Volkov, shedding light on how he views criticism and its impact on his career. This Saturday night, Almeida makes his return to the octagon as he faces Rizvan Kuniev in a heavyweight clash. The bout represents an important opportunity for him to rebound after his most recent appearance, where he came up short against fellow contender Alexander Volkov in a fight that sparked widespread debate among fans and analysts. A significant portion of the MMA community voiced dissatisfaction with Almeida's approach in that matchup, echoing critiques that have followed him throughout several of his UFC outings. Despite that, Almeida is still regarded as a legitimate threat in the heavyweight division and someone who could eventually find himself in the title picture, even if he's not currently viewed as the division's leading contender. Speaking recently with MMA Fighting, Almeida addressed the criticism head-on and offered a candid reflection on how he believes his performance was perceived. "I saw a lot of people talking about the fight, saying they didn't like it, that it was boring, and things like that. But I believe they say that because I'm Brazilian, you know? If it were a foreign fighter doing the same thing, people would probably enjoy it more. But that's life, and we keep moving forward. A lot of the people criticizing wish they were in my position today. That's just how it goes. In this sport, you're going to get both criticism and praise, and that's part of the path we choose." Almeida went on to explain that outside opinions no longer define his sense of fulfillment or success. "If one day the UFC decides they don't want me anymore, I'll still be very satisfied with everything I've done. What I achieved, what I lost, what I gained, none of that would change my life. The people who truly know me understand my story. I wasn't supposed to be here today. I was supposed to be a dealer following the same path as my brother, but thankfully, God guided me onto the right path, and now I'm here, living this moment and chasing my dreams."
A former UFC lightweight champion believes now might be the perfect time for Alexander Volkanovski to walk away from the sport following his dominant showing at UFC 325. UFC featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski outpointed Diego Lopez for the second time in less than a year last weekend at UFC 325. Delivering a trademark, high-level performance, Volkanovski neutralized Lopez from start to finish, controlling the pace and range throughout the fight in what many consider one of the most complete and dominant victories of his decorated career. Despite having just turned 37 a few months ago, Volkanovski continues to look like he's in elite physical condition and operating at the top of his game. He remains the clear standard-bearer of the division as he stares down a new wave of contenders. Lerone Murphy and Movsar Evloev are set to clash in a consensus #1 contender bout at UFC London on March 21st, with the winner likely earning a shot at Volkanovski's title. Still, one UFC legend feels that Volkanovski has already accomplished everything there is to accomplish. Following UFC 325, the former champion believes the Australian great should consider retiring on top and cementing his legacy without risking further damage. Frankie Edgar, Alexander Volkanovski should hang up the gloves after dominant win. In a recent interview with MMA Junkie, former UFC lightweight champion Frankie Edgar shared his thoughts on Volkanovski's future and offered a surprising perspective. "I would love for Volkanovski to say, 'I'm out, I'm leaving as the champion.' Because who gets to do that nowadays? Nobody. Not many people get their flowers in this sport, unfortunately, and he's in a position where he can. I totally get why he doesn't want to, because he's still competing and still the best in the world." HT Bloody Elbow. Volkanovski had hinted at the possibility of retirement ahead of UFC 325, referencing the wear and tear of a long career in several pre-fight interviews. However, after his commanding performance last Saturday in Sydney, there appears to be little immediate interest from the champion in stepping away. According to Volkanovski's longtime coach, Joe Lopez, the two-time featherweight champion may have around 4 fights left before seriously considering retirement. Still, Edgar believes recent knockout losses to Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev should factor into that decision, even with Volkanovski's continued success. Edgar knows the situation all too well. In the final stretch of his own UFC career, he endured a series of brutal knockout losses to Corey Sandhagen, Marlon Vera, and Chris Gutierrez before ultimately retiring following UFC 281.
UFC great Kamaru Usman has weighed in on the recent decision to remove Shavkat Rakhmonov from the UFC welterweight rankings due to ongoing injury concerns. As fans are well aware, it has now been more than a year since Rakhmonov last stepped inside the octagon. The undefeated welterweight has been dealing with a series of injuries behind the scenes, and his road back to competition has been anything but smooth. Recently, Rakhmonov revealed that he suffered another setback in his recovery, which has only added to the uncertainty surrounding his return and raised questions about whether he'll be able to come back at the same elite level. On a recent episode of the Pound for Pound podcast, which he co-hosts with Henry Cejudo, Usman shared his thoughts on Rakhmonov's removal from the UFC's top 15 rankings. Shavkat Rakhmonov is potentially out for the year, Usman said. I understand that he hasn't fought, but they left John in the rankings for almost 3 years. Usman went on to question the apparent inconsistency in how the UFC applies its rankings criteria. I didn't dispute it when John was kept in the rankings, and rightfully so, but now it feels like we're just picking and choosing when someone stays in the rankings and when they don't. What's the real standard here? Cejudo pushed back slightly, pointing out that Jon Jones is widely considered one of the greatest fighters of all time, which may explain the leniency shown in his case. Still, Usman's comments highlight a valid concern, especially considering how long Jones remained ranked, despite long periods of inactivity and little indication of an imminent return. For now, fans can only hope that Rakhmonov is able to fully recover and eventually return to competition at full strength. His talent is undeniable, and the welterweight division is undoubtedly more exciting with him in the mix. Whether he can reclaim his momentum and live up to his immense potential remains one of the biggest unanswered questions in the UFC right now. Justin Gaethje has shared his thoughts on a potential showdown with Ilia Topuria at the rumored UFC White House event later this summer, making it clear that the matchup is firmly at the top of his wish list. Last month, Gaethje captured the UFC interim lightweight title for the second time in his storied career. He did so in emphatic fashion, defeating Paddy Pimblett in a fight that became increasingly one-sided as it went on. In the process, Gaethje reminded fans and critics alike why he's long been considered one of the most dangerous and violent competitors to ever step into the octagon at 155 pounds. Naturally, the next logical move would be a unification bout against undisputed lightweight champion Ilia Topuria. However, as is often the case in mixed martial arts, nothing is ever guaranteed. Fight plans can change quickly due to injuries, personal issues, or promotional decisions, and Gaethje is well aware of how unpredictable the sport can be. Still, during a recent appearance on the Pat McAfee show, Gaethje made it clear that his focus hasn't wavered. For him, there's only one fight that makes sense. Ilia Topuria on the White House card. It has to be. No other option, Gaethje said, walking out of the Oval Office into the cage, wearing the flag. I've been speaking it into existence since I fought Rafael last year. I thought it would be Topuria in January, then I'd fight and defend my belt on the White House card in June. Things change, you can't control everything. Ilia takes a step back, has some personal issues. I still get to fight for an interim championship, which makes me a champion on paper, and that sets up Ilia Topuria on the White House card in June. For Gaethje, the vision is clear. A historic setting, a unified title on the line, and a chance to cement his legacy on one of the biggest stages the sport has ever seen. Bo Nickal recently opened up in more detail about why he had no interest in going through with a title unification match against Yoel Romero after their scheduled clash fell apart at the Real American Freestyle event on January 10th. The bout was supposed to crown the undisputed RAF 205-pound champion, but the entire plan unraveled when Romero came in a staggering 7 pounds overweight. With the weight miss being so significant, the match was cancelled. Nickal was awarded the undisputed championship, and Romero was stripped of his interim title on the spot. Nickal's choice not to accept the fight at a catchweight quickly drew heavy criticism from fans and even other fighters on the RAF 05 card, many of whom believed he should have taken the match regardless of the circumstances. The backlash intensified after Romero later competed at RAF 05 against Stephen Buchanan and ended up losing, which led some to argue that Nickal had missed an opportunity to silence doubters. Romero himself added to the controversy by suggesting that Nickal was protecting his UFC career, implying that a loss to him in wrestling could damage Nickal's momentum and reputation at the highest level of MMA. When asked about those comments in an interview with MMA Fighting, Nickal gave a measured response rather than outright dismissing Romero's claims. He admitted there was at least some truth to the idea, explaining that from his perspective, the situation simply involved far more downside than upside. Nickal said that even without the weight issue, he was already facing a veteran in his 40s, which limited what he stood to gain. Once the 7-pound weight miss was added to the equation, he felt the matchup no longer made sense. Nickal went on to explain that he was absolutely prepared to compete had Romero made weight or even come reasonably close. He said he could have justified moving forward if the miss had been 2, 3, or even 4 pounds, but 7 pounds crossed a line. Giving up that much size, especially against someone already cutting down from a much heavier natural weight, felt excessive and unnecessary. In the end, Nickal stressed that making weight is a core part of the sport, and while he understood the criticism, he stood by his decision to walk away from a situation he believed was unfair and not worth the risk.
There's been quite a bit of chaos on the scales at the UFC's events in 2026, with multiple fighters making headlines for all the wrong reasons. The first card of the Paramount Plus era served as a stark reminder of just how dangerous extreme weight cutting can be, when Cameron Smotherman collapsed on stage after making weight, sending shockwaves through fans and the MMA community alike. That incident alone reignited the debate about whether the UFC should reconsider its weight-cutting practices, especially with fighters putting their health at serious risk just to make a limit. Even before the weigh-ins for this weekend's return to the Meta Apex in Las Vegas, headliner Vinicius Oliveira was already talking about the massive cut he had to endure to make bantamweight, highlighting that extreme weight management isn't limited to just one fighter or event. Similarly, during UFC 325 Fight Week in Sydney, another fighter drew attention for his own struggles on the scales, with a moment that left fans wondering if he had blown his second chance at earning a UFC contract. The implications were immediate, as issues on the scales can derail months of preparation and impact a fighter's career trajectory. At UFC 325, New Zealander Aaron Tao became the center of controversy after being caught trying to manipulate the scales. Initially, Tao came in at 122.5 pounds for his flyweight bout, under the contracted limit, and then during his second attempt, stepped on at 129 pounds, prompting the cancellation of his matchup with Namsrai Botbayar in the Road to UFC Season 4 flyweight finals. This was a huge setback for Tao, especially after having come up short on Dana White's Contender Series, as it was his second opportunity to secure a UFC contract. The cancellation drew sharp criticism online, with reporter Marcel Dorff calling the situation absolutely pathetic and fans reacting to the drama on social media. However, the UFC later clarified the situation. According to an update from Chris Presnell on X, the promotion has moved on from Tao and instead scheduled Yin Shuai to face Namsrai Botbayar for the RTU 125 final, now slated for May in Macau.
though it remains uncertain whether it will be under the Road to UFC or UFC Fight Night banner. Bought by Ars manager Kay Ganbold confirmed the booking, and Presnell verified it with multiple sources. Following the incident, Aaron Tao addressed the controversy in a brief Instagram statement, apologizing to his opponent, the UFC, his team, and his fans. He admitted that despite pushing himself to the limit, he failed at the one critical responsibility of making weight and fulfilling his fight commitment. "I need to apologize to my opponent, the UFC, my team, and my fans. Though I pushed to the end, I have one job: to make weight and fight. I didn't do that. I'm sorry," Tao wrote, demonstrating accountability, though the missed opportunity and public scrutiny will likely weigh heavily on him moving forward. These events have reignited ongoing conversations about fighter safety and whether the UFC should implement stricter regulations on weight cutting, same-day weigh-ins, or closer monitoring of extreme dehydration methods. With multiple incidents occurring in just the first few events of 2026, it's clear that weight management remains one of the sport's most pressing and controversial issues.
Norma Dumont is in a frustrating spot despite a 6-fight win streak, finding herself with no clear path forward following the cancellation of Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes at UFC 324. The Brazilian contender had hoped that matchup would finally settle the title picture, but Harrison's neck injury, which required surgery for herniated discs, has left everything in limbo, likely delaying the fight until mid-2026. Dumont, 34, made it clear in an interview with MMA Junkie that she had even offered to step in and face Nunes for the belt when Harrison withdrew, but her offer went unaccepted. She believes Nunes opted to wait for Harrison instead, leaving Dumont stuck and frustrated. "I thought Amanda was back to really fight and fight whoever, and now it's all about that little issue they have between old team members, and whatever their problem is, and my career gets stuck because of this, so it's really frustrating," she said. Part of Dumont's frustration stems from the history between Nunes and Harrison at American Top Team. Nunes left ATT in 2022, citing Harrison's presence as a major factor, and both women share former coach Mike Brown. Beyond the top of the division, several ranked fighters are sidelined. Juliana Pena, ranked number 1, is recovering from elbow surgery after losing to Harrison at UFC 316, while number 2, Raquel Pennington, has been out since October 2024 with neck issues. Clean it up, and get new blood in there in place of the people that occupy these rankings and spend a year or 2 years without fighting. That's what keeps everything stuck. In a perfect world, these girls need to move on and give opportunity for new fighters, Dumont said. Dumont last competed in November 2025, edging Ketlin Vieira by split decision at UFC Fight Night 263 to extend her streak. Her run includes wins over Vieira, Irene Aldana, Germaine Durandamy, and Carol Rosa, yet she still has no scheduled opponent or clear path to a title shot. "It's really frustrating, I thought that once Kayla and Amanda fought, then finally it would make the division move forward. For me, it's a tough situation. Juliana's hurt, Raquel's hurt. I have nobody above me that would help me move up that staircase, and we're all stuck. The division's not moving," she explained. Despite the stalled division, Dumont remains focused and committed, continuing to train hard and prepared to take any fight the UFC offers. "It can take time, things can happen, but I guarantee you I will have my opportunity. I'm going to become champ," she stated, underscoring her determination to claim the title regardless of the obstacles. UFC 326 took a major hit over the weekend after one of its most significant matchups fell apart, as Brian Ortega was forced out of the event due to another injury setback. The former featherweight title challenger was scheduled to face fan favorite Renato Moicano in what was shaping up to be a marquee bout, potentially even a co-main event slot. For Ortega,
The withdrawal marks yet another frustrating chapter in a career that has stalled badly in recent years. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ortega has lost 5 of his last 7 fights and has struggled to stay healthy long enough to build momentum. While Ortega won't be stepping into the octagon with Moicano anytime soon, that didn't stop the Brazilian from making his feelings known in his own unique way. Renato Moicano mocks Brian Ortega after UFC 326 withdrawal. After learning the fight was canceled, Moicano made it clear he was unhappy about losing a high-profile opportunity. With his UFC 326 status now uncertain, the lightweight contender turned to social media and his podcast to vent his frustration, releasing a diss track aimed squarely at Ortega. In a video posted to TikTok, Moicano performed the song in Portuguese, mocking Ortega for yet another pullout. He took things a step further by referencing Ortega's personal life, including his former relationship with Tracy Cortez and her recent connection to UFC light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira. It wasn't just going to be Powhatan who was going to F you, Moicano rapped in one translated line. He also suggested Ortega would have been finished in the fight, labeled him a beta, and ended the track by repeatedly chanting Pereira's famous catchphrase, Chama. The diss culminated with Moicano declaring that he would have beaten up Ortega had the fight gone ahead, making his disappointment and disdain crystal clear. Despite the chaos, there may still be a path forward for Moicano to remain on the card. Rising lightweight Esteban Ribovic has publicly volunteered to step in on roughly 5 weeks' notice, according to his manager, Ali Abdelaziz. MMA Fighting's Damon Martin reported that Ribovic has agreed to face Moicano in Las Vegas on March 7th if the UFC gives the green light. While it wouldn't carry the same name value as Ortega, the matchup would present a dangerous and intriguing challenge. Ribovic owns a 15-2 professional record, with his only loss since 2023 coming via a controversial split decision against Nasrat Haqparast. For Moicano, accepting the fight would mean trading star power for risk, but it could also keep his momentum alive after years of ups and downs. As for Ortega, another injury-induced absence only deepens the questions surrounding his future and whether he can ever regain the form that once made him a perennial title contender.
The relationship between fighting nerds standouts Gene Silva and Mauricio Ruffy appears to have fractured after Ruffy chose to relocate to Australia for his UFC 325 training camp, where he worked closely with Alexander Volkanovski, the reigning champion atop Silva's weight class. What initially looked like a professional decision has since spilled into personal tension, with Silva making it clear he wants distance from his former teammate. Both Ruffy and Volkanovski emerged victorious at UFC 325 in Sydney, with Ruffy defeating Rafael Fiziev and Volkanovski retaining his title against Diego Lopez. But during fight week, fans noticed Silva had unfollowed Ruffy on social media, a move that quickly fueled speculation about internal issues within the Fighting Nerds camp. Silva later addressed the situation directly, though he avoided going into specific details. He described the split as internal business and stressed that he had no intention of exposing private matters. According to Silva, his focus is now on maintaining peace and pursuing his own goals, even if that means completely separating paths from Ruffy. While he insisted there was no hatred, he made it clear that any partnership between them exists only in the past, saying he hopes Ruffy succeeds but wants nothing further to do with him professionally or personally. Ruffy, for his part, painted a very different picture. He explained that his move to Australia was not a departure from the Fighting Nerds team and emphasized that he still holds Silva in high regard. Ruffy spoke emotionally about the difficult period that led him to train with Volkanovski, noting that the former featherweight champion supported him after the first loss of his UFC career and during the devastating loss of his brother. He repeatedly stated that he loves and respects Silva, claiming he has no idea what led to being unfollowed and insisting there is no bad blood on his end.
Ruffy also revealed plans to return to Sao Paulo and continue training at the Fighting Nerds gym, leaving the door open to potentially sharing space with Silva again. That possibility, however, was firmly shut down by Silva. When asked whether the two could ever train together again, Silva responded bluntly that there was zero chance. While reiterating his respect for Ruffy's talent and calling him a future star, Silva framed the situation as a personal realization rather than a public feud. He spoke openly about the mental and emotional pressures fighters face at the UFC level, even sharing that he attends weekly psychiatric sessions himself. Silva said he hopes Ruffy addresses his own personal struggles and thrives in life and in his career, but made it clear that whatever bond he believed they shared no longer exists. In his words, the partnership between Gene Silva and Mauricio Ruffy is over, and any idea of it continuing was something he now believes only ever lived in his own head.
UFC Vegas 113 was set to usher in a new chapter as the first fight night of the UFC Paramount era, but the event has already run into turbulence just days before fight night. The latest shakeup comes with reports that Said Nurmagomedov has withdrawn from his scheduled preliminary bout, forcing the promotion into another short-notice adjustment. The card is still anchored by a compelling headliner between Mario Bautista and Vinicius Oliveira, with notable names like Amir Albazi, Jailton Almeida, and Kyoji Horiguchi bolstering the undercard. However, one of the more intriguing prelim matchups, Nurmagomedov versus Javid Basharat, has reportedly been scrapped altogether. According to a report from @Club de las MMA on X, Nurmagomedov has pulled out of the fight, and Mexican standout Gianni Vasquez will step in as Basharat's replacement. The bout would mark Vasquez's UFC debut, and it comes on very short notice. Vasquez has built a strong resume outside the octagon, most notably with Up Next Fighting, UNF, where he captured the flyweight title and rode a 5-fight winning streak. Overall, the 13-4-1 prospect has earned a reputation as one of Mexico's most promising emerging talents. The jump to UFC competition, however, represents a significant step up. Basharat, despite being on a 2-fight skid himself, has shared the cage with proven UFC-level opposition and presents a stiff test for any newcomer, especially one stepping in without a full training camp. Still, short-notice debuts have produced memorable moments before, and Vasquez now has a golden opportunity to make an instant impression. For Nurmagomedov, the withdrawal adds to an increasingly uncertain stretch in his UFC run. Hailing from Dagestan, expectations were sky-high early in his career, and he initially lived up to the hype by winning 6 of his first 7 fights. Since then, consistency has been an issue. Losses to Jonathan Martinez and Bryce Mitchell halted his momentum, leaving him with a 1-2 record over his last 3 outings. The matchup with Basharat appeared to be a chance for both fighters to stabilize their footing in the division and rebuild confidence. As of now, the UFC has not made an official announcement confirming the change, but all signs point to Vasquez stepping in. If finalized, UFC Vegas 113 will now feature yet another storyline centered on opportunity and risk. Can a short-notice debutant seize the moment, or will Basharat use the chaos to get back into the win column? Either way, the bout adds another layer of intrigue to an event already under pressure to deliver as the UFC's new broadcast era begins.
At the promotion's first event of 2026, Justin Gaethje delivered another signature performance by defeating Paddy Pimblett to capture the interim lightweight title, becoming a 2-time interim champion in the process. The win immediately brought order to a division that had been stuck in uncertainty, at least at the top, and solidified Gaethje once again as one of the most dangerous and reliable fighters in the sport. What remained unclear after the fight was the status of Ilia Topuria. The undisputed champion was quick to scold both Gaethje and Pimblett following the bout, but questions lingered about when or even if he would be ready to return for a title unification fight.
Topuria had previously announced that he would not compete in the first quarter of 2026 due to what he described as a difficult personal situation, stressing that he did not want to hold the division hostage and would notify the UFC when he was ready to fight again. Despite the UFC making it clear they had no plans to strip him of the belt, the lack of a firm timeline led to the creation of the interim title that Gaethje now holds. That uncertainty naturally sparked concern among fans about how long Topuria might be sidelined and whether the situation could drag on deep into the year. Those concerns now appear to be easing. Spanish outlet Marca reported that Topuria and his ex-wife have reached a settlement, officially closing the personal matter that had been weighing on him. Around the same time, Topuria posted training footage on social media, captioned with a confident, "The champ is back!" signaling that his focus has fully returned to fighting. According to further reports, Topuria is already preparing for his comeback, with the UFC White House event on June 14th emerging as the most likely destination. Journalist Alvaro Colmenero added that there is a 90% chance Topuria's return fight will be a title unification bout against Justin Gaethje on that card. If that holds true, it would set up one of the biggest fights of the year, pairing Gaethje's relentless, fan-friendly style with Topuria's technical brilliance and finishing ability. Gaethje winning the interim title while representing the Stars and Stripes only strengthens the narrative for a high-profile unification clash on such a symbolic event. While fans may still have to wait a little longer to see Topuria back inside the octagon, the picture is finally coming into focus, and all signs point toward a massive showdown that could define the lightweight division for years to come.